Welcome to my tutorial for Road Rash for the PlayStation, and this pretty much applies to the Saturn and 3DO versions as well, I would think, because they're pretty much the same game. There's a few small differences. I think this game's on PC as well, so it'll probably apply to that too. So yeah, what I did was, for this tutorial, I edited down heavily, because the entire game takes about 2 hours and a half, 2 hours and 45 minutes, if you don't fuck up on any of the tracks and, you beat everything. And if you don't grind, for getting a better bike. Which you don't have to do, but I recommend doing it. It took me around 10 hours and 40 minutes to beat, with about 2 hours to 3 hours of grinding to get the good bike. Basically grinding for cash by doing the same races over and over again, which is what I'm going to recommend doing. Here I'm going to show the first race just to give an idea of how the game plays out. The first races, there's basically 5 circuits with 5 races each. And in the first circuit, the races are only about 4 miles long or so, which is very short. And then, as you progress to the next circuit, the way you progress to the next circuit is by qualifying for all 5 races in each circuit. To qualify for a race, or to qualify in a race, you have to place at least 3rd place or better. If you don't, then you just don't qualify. So, basically, after you qualify for all 5 of these races in this first circuit, you'll then go to the second circuit, then the third, then the fourth, and then finally the 5th, which is the final circuit. And, yeah, basically by qualifying, that's how you unlock the next circuit, by qualifying in all 5 races. And what happens is, after each circuit that you get to, basically the races extend by about maybe 3 or 4 miles every time you get to the next circuit, so they get progressively longer. It's pretty much the same track, on the same 5 tracks for the whole game, but they just get longer after each circuit. They extend a few miles until you get to the 5th circuit, which the races are about 16 to 17 miles long. So it becomes an endurance, a fast-paced endurance type of game. It becomes very difficult. So I do have some tips, for this game, because it's definitely an exceptionally difficult racing game. And probably one of the best racing games I've played, even, including current games that I've played through. It's an awesome game. But yeah, for the first circuit, what I recommend doing is don't qualify all 5 tracks. Qualify in maybe 3 or 4 tracks, but don't finish off the 5th track, because once you do that, you can't go back to the first circuit again to grind. So, I recommend grinding the tracks in the first circuit because they're shorter tracks and they're easy. So yeah, basically what you're going to want to do is play the tracks over and over again without doing the final qualifying track. Just play the other tracks again and again. You could even just play one track if you don't care about the variety. But if you want a little variety, then you can switch between the tracks. Just don't qualify in the 5th, the 5th one you haven't completed yet, because you can do them in any order. So just don't finish the 5th one. So yeah, so just do that. It's going to take probably between 2 and 3 hours of grinding. And then what you're going to see after I show the end of this race right here, you're going to see my bike immediately changes. That's because this video is heavily edited. So you'll see that immediately I purchased the most expensive bike in the game, which is probably the best bike in the game. I mean, from what I've read, I didn't try the other bikes, but it's a great bike. I mean, once you get it, you're totally equipped to beat the rest of the game, which, of course, I did that. So I can attest to that. So yeah. So now this race is going to end, and you'll see me, I go to the shop. Oh yeah, as far as the controls, I never once used the brake button in the entire game. When I want to slow down, I just let off the accelerator, which I'm going to explain more about that in the portion of the tutorial that shows the 5th circuit, which is the hardest races. So yeah, here we're going to buy the most expensive bike in the game. If you have around 38,000, like I have here, you'll have enough. It's only 40,000. You get some trade-in value for your bike. Also, you want to pick the character named Sydney when you start the game, because she starts with like $1,000, which gives you a little bit of a head start. And I think the bike that she has is pretty decent. So start with that character, I recommend. And then, yeah, get the Diablo Vipera bike is what you want to get. Yeah, so you want to get this bike. So once you have 38,000 and a little bit of trade-in value for your previous bike, you'll get 40,000 bucks. You're gonna have to grind for a while to get to that point, or you can, if you want, you can just play the game normally and get the bikes later on. But by getting this bike now, you're pretty much gonna blaze through the second and third circuits, and then it won't get a little bit more challenging until the fourth circuit. At least that was my experience. It depends on your skill level, obviously. Okay, so now we're in the final circuit because I edited this all the way to the end. So now we're on the final circuit. I wanted to focus on 3 races in the final circuit because there's 5 races, as I've explained, but 3 of them show most of what the game has to offer because the other 2 are basically just mix and match variations of segments that are in these tracks. I mean, they're not identical, but it's the same type of gameplay, so if you know how to play these 3 tracks, you'll be fine with the other 2. So first here we have the Sierra Nevada track, which normally is the easiest track in the game, I found, because it's so much more open. There's not a lot of dense traffic, and a lot of times you have a lot of lanes to work with, so it's usually the easiest track. But in the case of the 5th Circuit, I found it to be one of the harder tracks. Not the hardest, but one of the harder because there's not a lot of obstacles for the AI to crash into, like in the city levels. Now, of course, that can work against you or for you. If you crash a lot, then obviously you're going to have a hard time. But once you get good at the game, you shouldn't be crashing, a heavy amount in most of the races. Although it does happen to me sometimes when I did win. I had races where I got down to the very end of being wrecked. And your wrecked life bar is that life bar in the middle of your screen. That's your bike health. When that goes down, you get wrecked. But yeah, this track, it's mainly going to be more, a little bit difficult because the AI doesn't crash as much, so it's a little bit harder to get ahead in this track. Now, luckily, I got ahead pretty early on, but what this game does is it has very cheap rubber band AI, which means that the racers will just catch up to you out of nowhere, especially near the end of the race. It can be very fucking cheap. And a lot of times you'll be winning and then you'll just lose because like 3 guys will just pass you at the very end, or they'll just kick you off into the into a tree and kill you, and take you out and then just rush to the end. So you can you're never safely in first place like in some of the I believe the ones for Genesis you could get a safe lead and just keep that lead by driving well. In this, that doesn't happen. So you always have to be ready to get guys off of your ass. So, yeah, so with that said, I'll go over some general tips now. When you're accelerating, there's times when you just want to hold down the gas the entire time. And, go as fast as possible. And maybe let off the gas a little bit, just enough to make these sharp turns. Basically, if your bike goes completely horizontal completely sideways for a short period of time, you'll flip off the bike. So you're allowed to go sideways for a very little amount of time, but you'll get a feel for it. But if you're sideways for too long, it seems you just fly off the bike. So you got to get used to just doing that enough to make the turns, which takes a little bit of practice. This whole game is going to take quite a bit of practice, though, so don't get discouraged if you don't beat some of the tracks right away. It's a very difficult game, so definitely not advised probably for beginning players overall, but because it's quite it's one of the harder racing games for sure. But what's exciting about replaying the levels is that each race, even when you've done the same track, feels different because different shit always goes down, so it's always exciting. But it can be very frustrating, of course, to get near the end of an 8-minute race and then fuck up because the AI will just blast out of nowhere or you hit into a tree. A lot of shit can go wrong. And there's a decent amount to cover, but I think I can cover it in the remaining time of the tutorial. I didn't want to make this 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 40 minutes long and show all the races. I do have the full video up. Both a single video showing all the races and one that's in about 10 parts. So those are available. But, yeah, so you want to hold the gas down most of the time for full acceleration. You want to learn how to dodge and weave through traffic at full speed, including while using nitro. And to use your nitro boost, which gives you a speed boost, you tap the gas button twice, and on the second time you hold it. And that'll give you a nitro boost, and your speed will be increased. And you have about, let's see, you have like 9 of them. It's shown by the squares in the middle, right above your middle bike health bar is shown the little squares. And those are how many nitros you have remaining. So I recommend saving those for because these are long races. So I recommend saving those for times when you're in trouble, such as you have a cop on you, or you have a racer beating the shit out of you, or when you get knocked off your bike and you want a quick acceleration boost from getting knocked off the bike, you can start off with a nitro. So those are the situations I most recommend using nitros in. Other than that, unless you're confident, I would say save them. I mean, I got kind of confident with the game, so I would use extra ones when I didn't really need to use them. But, you know, if you're having trouble, I recommend using them at opportune times, because if you waste them all, then you won't be able to get out of certain situations as easily. Now, if you're getting mobbed by a biker or multiple bikers or cops, one of the best things you can do is sometimes let off the accelerator. Don't really use the brake. I never use the brake, but just let off the accelerator enough for them to pass you and kind of let them go ahead of you. And a lot of times they will crash into shit. Or just wait for an opportunity when you can get enough speed on a straightaway to pass them and get the fuck out of there. Those are some tips I recommend, because if you try to keep pace with some of these bikers, they'll just punch you to death. You'll get if you get punched enough times, you fall off the bike, because there's a health bar for that. So now your player health bars separate from your bike health bar, I believe. If the player health bar gets depleted, I think you just fall off the bike. I don't think you can get sent to the hospital or anything. I've never had that happen. But if your bike health bar goes down, the middle health bar, that means you're wrecked. And then you have to pay a fee. And, of course, you lose the race. But you'll have to pay a fee, and then you can start the races again. But remember, in this game, you can save between every race. So you never have to accrue any penalties as far as being busted or wrecked. You know, any cost associated with that can be ignored, because you should be saving after you beat each race, especially on this difficulty. On this, Fifth Circuit is extremely difficult, so you'll want to save after you beat each race. I use an emulator, so I just press save state. I don't have to go through all the menus and all that shit. But either way, you'll want to save. That way you can reload your save if you need to, and not accrue any kind of penalties. So the only problem you'll have with getting busted or wrecked is going to be, that you're going to have to reload your game. Unless you're, don't give a shit and you just want to pay the fees. They're not always that expensive anyway, and if you have a lot of excess money, then you may not give a shit. Sometimes I just let it happen, because I had over $50,000 or $60,000 by the end of the game, just because I was beating a lot of the races, but I wasn't qualifying. I mean, I was completing the full length of the races, but I would be like in 5th place or something, so I wouldn't qualify. So yeah, now getting busted, when you hear the police sirens, that means that you're within range of getting busted, but you won't always get arrested. If you fall off your bike when you hear the sirens, there is a chance you're going to get busted, but it doesn't always happen. But it's risky, so you do not want to fall off your bike when you hear any kind of police sirens. And obviously when you see the cop and you're fighting with the cop, obviously that's dangerous. Now if the cop knocks you off the bike, a lot of times he won't bust you because he'll end up being too far ahead of you to bust you. So there is that. But keep that in mind. Now this is the city level. This is also similar to the peninsula level. Very similar. So I didn't show the peninsula level, for time's sake. I just want to get to the point. And this is the city level. Now the city level is extremely dense, as you can see, with traffic. So what you're really going to have to learn to do is two things that are going to be very useful. One is you should not try to pass the cars in the rightmost lane by passing them on the right side, because you're going to be trying to go between trees and the curb of the sidewalk. And a lot of times you're not going to make, you're not going to be able to get in between, and you're going to just get knocked off. So even the right, try to always pass the rightmost cars, pass them on the left, or stay in the middle lane. Try to do it that way if you can. Now occasionally you may take a risk with trying to pass them on the right between the curb and the car, but I don't recommend doing that. That seems to apply more to the right side. I don't know if it's, it probably applies to the left side as well, but I usually kept it in mind mostly for the right side. I don't know why. But, yeah, so basically, in this game, you're going to want to be making a lot of subtle movements, which are left and right turning. Like, you're going to want to tap left and tap right to make very subtle adjustments. You don't want to be holding down left and right for very long in this game when turning. You want to kind of just tap it just enough to move into the right lanes. And you'll get used to how when the road turns, it kind of throws you into the opposite direction. You'll get used to that. That's part of adjusting to how the road curves and turns. And you always want to be very good at identifying what lanes the cars are in, and what lanes the bikers are in. You know, you want to be able to read that very quickly. That's what's going to make you successful in this game, is being able to read that, because it's pretty pixelated. So you're going to want to be able to read it very quickly and make those adjustments. Otherwise, you're going to be crashing a lot. So you got to really get used to like immediately knowing what lane the car is in. Sometimes it may throw you off at first because the road's curved, so you may not be able to read it very quickly at first. But that's just part of practicing and getting better at the game, which you're probably going to have to practice a lot. So just keep that in mind. Once you get better at that, you're going to be able to weave in and out of traffic as you see me here, and not crashing a lot most of the time. Though, you see, it's very easy to crash. You can get blindsided very easily around turns. So, but you will be able to minimize that. You know, the more you play this game, you're going to be able to minimize that to where, I think on the final track, which is the hardest track in my opinion, I only crashed twice or something like that. So it can definitely be minimized. It's hard to completely avoid it most of the time, but you know, you can crash actually a lot sometimes and still win, but it's a lot harder to pull off. And it's going to make things a lot harder because you're going to be back kind of far. The thing with you can also go between the cars, obviously. That's a more dangerous maneuver, as you saw me doing. But you'll get used to doing it. It takes a little bit more precise placement. And, you know, it's risky, as you can see. But, I think in this one I crashed quite a bit, but still managed to survive in this attempt. See, sometimes you'll jump over cars as well, but, I mean, it's usually not planned, because when you go up hills, sometimes you'll do a big jump. Sometimes also hitting pedestrians, you'll do a large jump. Or it's usually a small little hop, but sometimes you'll hop over a car by hitting a pedestrian. It's not recommended to try to do that, but it can be done. Hitting the pedestrians is not really a big deal. It just gives you a little hop. But you do not want to hit into the cars, obviously. Now, depending how you hit the cars, sometimes you'll glance off of them if you hit them on the side and you're not going that fast. But a lot of times you'll flip, you'll get knocked off the bike. When dealing with cops, you see I routed him a little bit into the car. And that took care of him. You want to try to, bikers and police, you want to try to get them to route into the car. Now, one thing I kind of noticed, I don't know if it's just me or if it's something that you can really do, but it seems like you can manipulate the AI a little bit. But it may just be in my head, but it seems like when you go in one direction, the bikers go a little bit in the opposite direction. And it seems sometimes you can kind of route them in the cars and shit. But again, that could just be in my head. I try to do that, but I don't know if I'm really pulling it off or if it's just psychological. So keep that in mind. Maybe experiment with that. But really, the only type of fighting you should be concerned with is not fighting anyone in the game unless they're on your ass fighting you. Or unless you can get in a kick and push them into a car or something. That's what I like to do a lot. The only fighting move I use, I don't even bother with the weapons most of the time. You can grab like clubs, chains, and various weapons. And the club seems to be the best one, but you can grab it by punching guys that have the weapons and they're attacking. If you punch them at the right time, you'll grab the weapon they have. But it doesn't, you don't keep it for the next level, and for me it's pretty useless because the only fighting technique I really use is the kick. The reason I like the kick is because it pushes the bikers off of you. And once you get decent with timing the kick, you can push racers into other cars, into buildings, into guardrails, etc., and get rid of them. And it's great for cops because you can take out cops fast, and then they can't bust you because you'll be knocked over. You see, I crashed a lot on this attempt. But so I suggest only using the kick. Don't bother with punching and all that other shit. It's pretty much worthless to punch guys or use the weapons. I would say just kick and only use it when you need to. Don't slow down to fight guys. You should always be trying to pass the other racers. You shouldn't be trying to get in brawls with them because you see how dangerous it can be. It's better to just... And actually, I used fast forward when I got knocked off my bike on the emulator. That's why I run so fast back to my bike. And I also used it for loading screens because I don't want to sit there and watch the guy walk back to the bike. You do have some control when your character is walking back to the bike to dodge stuff, but I never use it, so I wouldn't really bother with it. But so basically the only thing you should really be using is the kick to push guys. And like I said, only use it when you need it. Now the nitro is weird. Sometimes I start a race and it seems like I don't have any nitro. So I don't know how it carries over between levels. I'm not sure how that works. But as you know, you'll see in those squares that are like when they're light green, that means you have nitros, and there's 9 of those. So you'll see it indicated there. There may be a way to reset it, maybe by wrecking and then repairing the bike. I'm not sure. I mean, I noticed it only one time, I think, where it seemed like I was missing nitros. But yeah, another thing to keep in mind is if you have a lead, then start letting off the gas more. Start tapping the gas more and keep yourself at a slower speed. And the reason to do that is because it's a lot safer and you'll reduce your risk of crashing. And if you do hit into a car lightly, you'll kind of just nudge the car and you won't necessarily go flying. Unless you hit the car directly, in the middle. That usually takes you out. But, you have a lot more room for error if you slow down to, like, a slower speed. You can see now I have a decent lead, and I think I'm slowing down a little bit at this point. Whereas I could be hauling ass right now and, going a lot faster, but I don't bother doing that because I have a good lead and I'm near the end of the race. So I start tapping the gas more. I mean, I'm still holding it in brief spurts, but I'm tapping it a lot more to keep my speed, at a much lower rate. Because this bike can do about, between 160 without nitro and like 180 with nitro. So I'm going about like, hovering between like 110 and 130 or something, so, or 105 and 130 even. So yeah, so I mean, keep that in mind. Learn how to pace yourself. You don't always want to go full blast. If the guys are ahead of you, then you're probably going to want to try to go as fast as possible. But you don't always have to take them. If there's only a few guys ahead of you, you can wait till later in the race and then go past them when there's more straightaways and easier parts to take over. So I mean, you shouldn't really let the game dictate your pace too much. Try to have some control over the pace of the speed that you're going. Because the game wants you to get super intense and crash, especially at the end when the bikers get that rubber band AI. They want you to like really get aggressive. So yeah, this is the final track that you need to qualify for. You can do it as the first track, obviously, because you can do them in any order. This is the hardest track, though, as far as I'm concerned. Because in this track, it encourages a lot of 2-lane congestion with a lot of fighting, cops, and a lot of traffic. And it's often 2 lanes. Also, if you get hit the wrong way and flip off your bike, you can go into the ocean and instantly wreck. It's pretty much a one-hit death. So, so it's not going to kill you, but you'll have to restart the race and you'll get fined. So, yeah, and this is especially true. You don't necessarily want to be full accelerating all the time in this area. I'm doing it. I'm pretty much full accelerating here because I'm very used to dodging and moving fast at this point. But it is very dangerous to go full speed at times. I think I may have only crashed twice this time, so this was a good run. But the AI fucked me in the end, and I got very lucky, as you'll see. But a lot of times you'll be doing great, and the AI will fuck you near the very end. They'll just speed ahead of you, or kick you into a tree or something. So there is that cheapness. So you hear I'm using the kick to try to push the guys off of me, hopefully into a building. And then that'll, keep them from being on your ass and harassing you. Your other option is to use nitro to get past guys that are harassing you. But for some reason, I think I started this race with no nitro. So I was not even able to use nitro for this. Now, keep in mind, sometimes you get behind the fence, and that, if you get kicked behind the fence, that can be a very big annoyance. So, you have to race on the edge until you can get back on the road again. But, yeah, I didn't start out with any nitro, I don't think. So, that made the race even harder. I wasn't able to use nitro at all. And I think I only crashed twice. But, in some ways, maybe it was safer because I wasn't going at as high of a rate of speed. So, in some ways, it may have worked in my favor. But, also, some bikes don't have nitro, I think. But, if you use my strategy, you're going to be grinding and getting this bike, so you're not going to have that problem. And I don't know about the more expensive bikes. They may all have nitro. I only purchased this bike, so I really don't know. But yeah, there's going to be times like on this track where, depending on your placing, especially near the end of the race, you're going to want to start tapping the gas more and slowing down. Because, once you already have a lead, the game is going to fuck you anyway with the AI. No matter how fast you're going, the rubber band AI is most likely going to kick in anyway. and the guys are going to pass you even if you're at full speed. So once you understand that about the game, you won't be as panicky and as intense about trying to maintain full blast speed the entire race. You'll learn to pace yourself more by knowing that the enemies are going to rush in towards the end. So those are a lot of the main tips. It actually took most of the 30 minutes to cover all that. But yeah, it's going to be, a lot of times it's going to be very slight like taps to the left and right on the D-pad to maintain. Also, while you're doing that, you want to be letting off the gas very, very slightly on turns. Because if you don't do that, then of course you're going to go completely sideways and flip off the bike, or you're just going to fly into a tree. But you really don't have to use the brake. I would recommend not using the brake at all in the game. And yeah, the brake is pretty much, I found it to be useless. Because you never want to slow down like a major amount. You usually just want to like let off the gas, slow down a little bit, and adjust your turning and try to turn out of the way of something. But you never want to come to like a complete stop. I mean, you might as well just crash the bike if you're going to do that. It's a big waste of time. But maybe some will find the brake useful, but I never used it. And you can see these races are very long, so crashes add up. Now see, there's these paths you can like decide which path you want to take. Sometimes multiple times in a level. I believe the right path is usually the faster path, but it's usually the harder path as well, with more traffic and more turns and things like that. Now I'm not 100% sure on that. I just read that in a guide, and I wasn't really like making a very detailed comparison. I kind of just went on whichever road I felt like taking. I didn't really care too much. But keep that in mind, that the right one may be a shorter path, but a harder path. I mean, at least that's what I read in the fact. But the guy in the fact said he never even completed the final race. So I don't know how good he was at the game, but or how much he really investigated that, but so. Yeah, at this point, you see I'm in pretty good placing, but then some bullshit does occur within the next few miles. And also, while switching at those forked roads, while trying to switch paths, I found a lot of times if I tried to take the left path, sometimes the screen would just scroll in a weird way, and it would put me in the middle of the screen and have me crash into a house or something like that. So I kind of found it safer to take the right path, at least on this level, because I was getting fucked over by some weird issue with that in this level. But at this point, I'm driving a little bit more carefully. I'm not going at full speed, because I know I can. Maybe I went. I might have been accelerating fully to pass some of these guys, but I was playing a lot more carefully towards the end. But yeah, some shit will go down towards the end. You see, I'm in second place here. Now I'm going pretty fast. I don't think I'm going full on speed here. I think I'm playing it kind of careful. But I don't know. You can't really get super fast, I don't think, in this area because of all the turns and the narrow roads. But I think I'm letting off a little bit at this point. But you'll get a feel for the pace. See, these guys just busted right ahead of me, like out of nowhere. That's how this game works. So while you're getting to the end, the guys are going to just bust. See, look, everybody's starting to come up from behind me now. Cops, racers. I'm still in third place, so at this point I would still qualify. But watch what happens at the end. The game just tries to fuck me at the end. But then the game fucks itself, and I got lucky. So, but I was actually playing, I would say very well for this race. I was going pretty fast. I was keeping good pace, but the game still tries to fuck me in the end. See these guys coming up from behind me out of nowhere? This guy, that guy, they all just rush ahead of me. And at this point, I basically lost. Until that happened. All the guys crashed. Somehow they all just fucking crashed. I don't know how that happened. I didn't even see any traffic there, but they all crashed. They must have fucked up on the turn or something. But yeah, the thing with the AI in this game is they're never too far behind you. Like, if you crash, you'll usually get passed by at least one guy. And they're never that far ahead of you. Though they seem to be, quite a bit farther ahead of you than they are behind you. But the game kind of limits, I think, how far ahead and how far behind they can get. Same applies to you. So the same rules apply to you. It seems, you can never get far ahead of them, and you can never get that far behind them. So it works out in your favor in some ways, but it also makes it so that it's actually more of a detriment to you when you're good at racing the tracks, because it means that even if you're going 180 miles an hour for most of the race, or as fast as you can, you're only one crash away from getting fucked over at any time. So once you learn these things about the game and how it's paced, I think that'll help a lot. Let me know if you have any other questions, and thanks for watching.